Hello everyone, welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be explaining to you the entire Fortnite storyline. Now on screen right now will be timestamps depending on what part of the storyline you want to see, whether it be chapter 2, chapter 1 or chapter 3. And I'm just going to mention a few people that I got ideas from, that being Revetcha, Top 5 Gaming and PlayStation Grenade. Anyway, let's get into it. In the beginning, the only thing that existed was darkness. That was until a sudden spark ignited, and it sprung into existence the 0 point. A very powerful ball of energy which has the ability to traverse dimensions, which made many seek out its power. So in order to protect itself, it created two islands, one above it being the Chapter 1 island, and the other below it being the unknown flip side. Probably a mixture of the future Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 locations, but it was not done quite yet. It created a bubble around the islands. This bubble was easily entered, but hard to escape. And yet the 0 point was still not done. It created a defense mechanism which wiped the minds of every person every 22 minutes. It does this to anyone that was not protected by an airtight suit or owned a portal device which allows them to escape in other dimensions to avoid the mind wipe. This is known as the loop, which is represented by a deadly storm which does have some kind of sentience, being able to decide where it goes. And finally, on the 7th day, it was done. The 0 point had created the perfect defense system for about 5 minutes. A group known as the Six found Reality Zero and took up residence on the flip side and the nearby ice moon, building the location known as the Sanctuary. When they found the 0 point, they built a facility known as the Bridge, as it was a bridge between the top side and the flip side. But suddenly, it was invaded by a nefarious group led by an individual known as Geno. Him and his army took over the top side and the bridge, and they even kidnapped a member called the Paradigm, causing the rest to flee to the flip side, to the launch pad, where they flew off to the moon base to think of a rescue mission. At an unknown point in time, the Cube King crash-landed on the island in a red cube. He was immediately detained and captured in the same cell block as the Paradigm, but by the newly named Imagined Order, named after two members of the Six, as a mockery. The Cube King was abused and had his powers stripped from him, but before he could escape himself, Paradigm did. This made Cube King resent her, believing her to be affiliated with the group in some way. But unbeknownst to him, the Paradigm, who had grown close to the Cube King while in captivity, had been the one to beg the Foundation to rescue the Cube King. When they did, so he was given an airtight suit by them and was renamed the Origin, which is how they became the group known as the Seven. So a bit more background on the Seven. The Seven is a group who wants to liberate the 0 point and destroy the enhanced loop that the IO has created. This group is led by the Foundation, aka Dwayne The Rock Johnson. There's the Origin, the Seven's Field General War Tactician, the Visitor, the Seven's Navigator, don't know why I said it like that, the Scientist, the Seven's Smartest Member and Constructor, the Paradigm, the Seven's Pilot, and also probably the member that found Reality Zero, the Imagine, the Seven's Munition Expert and Anarchist, and finally the Order, the dedicated incognito spy. But IO, on the other hand, want to use the 0 point to kidnap people from other dimensions in the Omniverse to make them fight in the enhanced loop. It's led by Geno, a character we've only seen in pictures in Dr. Sloan's office. Speaking of which, there's the snake Dr. Sloan. As of now, she's the main antagonist of Fortnite and is scarily manipulative. She can watch an IO guard die in front of her and she won't move a muscle. She's that dedicated to the Imagined Order. Finally, the IO guards are your 9 to 5 workers, but only happy when they're allowed a lunch break. Now, in Season 3 of Chapter 1, the Seven tried their first attack. They sent the Visitor in a meteor from the moon base and ordered he land on Dusty Depot, which caused the IO to go into full panic mode and set up a facility around the rock and bring high-tech equipment to begin drilling inside. They find the Visitor's lifebod. Before they could be reported, the Visitor escaped and robbed the IO guards about any information they may have on the 0 point. But all they knew that it was somewhere in the centre of the island. He also found out, as a distraction, the IO began producing a movie set. One of these sets included a rocket, something that the Visitor could use to get back to the flip side without looking too sus. But Big Man Fizz was going to need a lot of power to get the rocket moving. So he harvested hot rocks and chunks of the meteor and loaded them into the IO trucks, which he hijacked using 7 tech. and sent it to the location of the rocket to fuel it. He then installed something called a 0-point oscillator, the Seven's first attempt at a device that can lock onto the 0 point. And when the visitor launched, it activated, locking onto tilted towers. Knowing this was a mistake, the visitor activated a sideways rift, a crack in reality which allows you to teleport anywhere in a blink of an eye. He then reappeared above Moisty Myers, trying to fix the 0-point oscillator, and when he went through another sideways rift, he found it was beneath Loot Lake. And all of a sudden, he reappeared above the lake and shot up into the sky, breaking the bubble reality 0 and escaping back to the flip side with the information he desired. However, the rift in the sky is bound to cause problems, and it does exactly that. It rifting objects from reality 0 to Earth, and even taking some from Earth to Athena. One of which being a human graffiti artist, Drift, who immediately begins befriending loopers and getting close to the truth, which Io always doesn't want happening, as he could spread the news across dimensions and they all get locked up for messing with the creator of the Omniverse and trapping innocents in a temporal loop. So they send in an elite task force of IO guards called Enforcers to stop him from escaping, and they succeed. Just slowly becomes a looper and forgets ever being a citizen of Earth. However, the IO can't quite done. Slowly, over time, the bubble started to reform, slowly closing the sideways rift. However, a group known as the Last Reality sensed the 0 point's energy and sent in a sentry to find the source of the high energy signature. So, the Last Reality is the third and final major faction of the Fortnite storyline. It's led by the Q Queen, the elemental Dark Matter. We'll meet other elementals later in the timeline. The Q Queen comes from a dimension known as Sideways, an orange world full of zombies, rock monsters, aliens, and cubes, dark matter mutated into a solid. They have an armada of saucers, abductors, motherships, and a ball-shaped ship called the Cube's Cradle, which can be controlled by the Q Queen remotely for all the golden cubes acting as its power source. Their goal is to be the last reality standing, and destroying the creator of all realities would be a good start. Meanwhile, on the island, the Sentry Purple Cube rolled around the map, planting last reality markings on the island in an attempt to create suitable environments for the Armada. But it wasn't able to with the ample power it had, so it continues its travels towards Loot Lake, where its energy sensors were at its highest. So the Sentry Cube, which the loopers began calling Kevin, doinked himself in the lake and sunk into the water below, finding something mysterious. So in Season 6 of Chapter 1, Kevin latched onto the island in the middle of Loot Lake and ascended, leaving direct hold to the mysterious object, and Kevin simply couldn't break it himself. So he decided to bring in a portion of the Last Reality. He took all the energy back from the Last Reality imprintings and opened a portal, letting in zombies, but kept the IO and the loopers busy. For over time, his solid outer shell began to shatter and revealed the more liquid-like inner core, but slowly began to drip into the sinkhole below in an attempt to corrode the object. But eventually, he lost all his power and exploded. The portal closed and the zombies lost their source of power. The 0 point beneath the lake, in a sense of desperation to save its island, its only source of protection, teleported all of the loopers into its inner shell, where it actually resides, a place called the In-Between, the area to traverse other dimensions. Meanwhile, it repaired the lake and made sure it incorporated the fallen pieces of the cube, as a way to make the loopers never truly see it and try and destroy it, especially due to their purposely increased violence levels. So, after it's done, 0 point, in the form of a butterfly, goes up to the loopers and teleports them out, where they stare at the reformed Loot Lake. However, the cube's explosion piqued the interest of another elemental, the Ice King. Obviously, the elemental of ice, so he enlists his friend, Sergeant Winter, to send a robot called AIM onto the island to see what's up. He sees the 0 point and what it's capable of, so he sets off with his castle and servants and slowly make their way to the island, floating on the waters and approaching from the southwest. And in Season 7, they conquer the corner of the map with Polar Peak, home of the Ice King, directly in the centre. And over time, his castle began to fall due to the heat of Reality 0, revealing many secrets, but also awakening an ancient foe. Deep in the dungeons, encased in ice, was a fellow elemental, the Fire King, the elemental of fire. He was the most troublesome and caused the first elemental wall, which caused all 5 elementals to flee to their individual planets. Fortunately, the Ice King was brave enough to stop him and put him under a deep freeze, locking him deep in the castle's dungeons. The elementals were still fractured and refused to return, going off to do their own thing, and the Ice King was left to his own devices. In present time, the Fire King had escaped, taking with some dragon eggs and a key to unlock his restraints. Realizing he had escaped, the Ice King began to cast the same spell from before, utilizing some of the cube shards to spread it across the island. Like the cube's corruption, but it didn't work. Throughout the time it took to cast the spell, the Fire King had transformed back into his true form. He took up residence in the northeast and began to form his own landscape, similar to his foe, and in Season 8, a volcano had risen to the surface, along with a tropical forest. Now that he dominated the northeast, he was ready to seek out the 0 Point, with the help of the creatures that hatched from the dragon eggs. These beings were called hybrids. They were half dragon, half ninja. But when he reached the rumoured location, he was plundered by the Ice King and his Yeti servants, also pirates for some reason. He made quick work of the Ice King's forces, causing him to flee. He then made a deal with the pirates, letting them stay in Lazy Lagoon and stay out of the war over the 0 Point. That's when the Io burst onto the scene. They began digging in random places on the island, trying to find out what the cube saw. First they dug near the desert, then at Dusty Divot, only to be stopped by lava. They then dug near Loot Lake, finding a slab of metal, and finally Loot Lake itself. Beneath the soil was a huge unbreakable vault, which protected the 0 Point. And when it was threatened by Kevin, it had no choice but to hide it once more. So the Io could not instantly gain access to the inner 0 Point and start exploiting it at the same time. I didn't put a comma. At the same time, the Io brought on a new recruit, Singularity. And when she got close to the vault, she is recognised, and it summoned the 5 puzzling keys onto the island to unlock it and access the 0 Point. Singularity is actually a member of the 7, known as the Paradigm, sent into the Io as a spy to gather intel. When the 7 had built the bridge, the vault was a one-group project that has a direct way to access the in-between, which at the time was used as storage, as it is an infinitely large space, and the keys each had a task that had to be completed to be able to activate the vault. Once all the keys had been placed in the vault, it opened, revealing the inner 0 Point, calm, and 6 weapons lost to time around it. Loopers were brought in and began smashing at their favourite weapon, and eventually it was freed and brought back into loop. Then the 0 Point, feeling a disturbance, tossed everyone out. On the outside world, the Fire King had begun his attack. His volcano erupted, destroying 2 beloved locations, Retail Row and Tilted Towers, and also destroying part of Polar Peak, a purposeful shot by the Fire King. He was not alone while in the dungeons of the Ice King's castle. He had a friend who had only one purpose in his life, to devour, and no, it's not the Foundation. After all was said and done, the blame was put on Singularity, and she was instantly put to work on rebuilding Tilted and Retail, and turning them into futuristic cities, powered by the Vault and the brand new pressure plant built into the remains of the volcano. The Io trapped both the kings in the loop. Killing them would destroy the universe, so they were kept alive, but they no longer had any memory of their powers or their kingdoms. So Io had control over pressure plant. Season 9 was mostly peaceful, every looper enjoying the upgrades provided by Singularity in the Imagined Order. But peace didn't last long. Slowly, the crack in Polar Peak began to show something. Beneath the iceberg, a large eye that seemed curious about the loopers that passed. By a few days later, the iceberg had been taken by the beast and it fled into the ocean. The Io began working on a countermeasure, but still, the beast known as the Devourer was on the prowl, destroying multiple buildings, the most notable being the factory by Loot Lake, which ended up destroying the wire connecting the vault to Neo Tilted. Some of the 0 Point's energy seeped into the beast, and then it had the ability to shoot a green laser. How helpful. Knowing where to look, the Devourer leapt back into the ocean, deciding the best time to strike was when the Io were occupied in building the countermeasure, a robot that is to be piloted by Singularity. So when the Devourer struck, Singularity stepped out of pressure plant and began firing at the beast that was pounding on the vault, trying to claim the 0 Point's full power. The beast was unfazed and fired back at the mech with its green laser. Singularity quickly retaliated and speared the beast into the ocean, and emerged seemingly victorious, but the beast was still alive and leaped onto Singularity. In a last-ditch effort to save herself, she ejected the right arm and sent the beast flying across the island. Beaten and broken, she collapsed onto the vault, the beast slowly getting back up. In a moment of desperation, she plunged her arm into the bridge, pulling out the physical form of the 0 Point, its power charging at the mech. Though as a result, the 0 Point was destabilized, and Singularity had just lost the trust of Io. But she still continued fighting, turning and punching the monster across the island. Suddenly, from Neo Tilted, she grabbed onto a statue and revealed it was the sword. In one last leap, she stabbed the Devourer, Quickly, she left the island one last salute, flying back onto the moon, leaving the robot on their moon base, where it's decommissioned and spread across the flip side so it can never be repaired. And this moment was where the Seven really split. Those in support of the paradigm, and those who think the paradigm should stay with the robot on the faraway moon. But they didn't have time to think about that at the moment. They had to restabilize the 0 point so they sent the scientist, a smartest member, to go fix it. Meanwhile, on the top side, the 0 point was ready to implode. But as soon as it did, the scientist entered the bubble, so it paused to focus on repairing that. But it was so unstable, it turned back time, bringing back Dusty Depot, which the scientist took home in, and began working on rift beacons, a device that can open rifts on the flip side to allow the Seven to enter when the time is right, with the added side effect of it creating small reality rays that change the entire POI. The IO during all this time, they were panicking. They didn't know how to restabilize the 0 point. Apologies. So they sent their field agent John Jones to go and convince the Seven to help, which they did. The scientists, thinking they had a change of heart, sadly, all they wanted was a 0 point back, and that's unfortunately what happened. The scientists had built a rocket to act as a catalyst to all the other sideways drifts in the sky, allowing the other 6 members to join him on the island and enact his plan. Unfortunately, he had been in the loop to launch the rocket, so he took off his helmet, got on the rocket. Before the loop could reset, after 22 minutes, he took off into the sky, quickly put back on his helmet, and got in contact with the Seven, ordering them on what to do. Scientists went full speed at the bubble, breaking it, creating a sideways rift, which shook all the others, opening them and allowing the Seven to reach the top side, still without giving the IO any info on their base of operations. The Seven had a plan to push the 0 point back into the bridge, and back into so-called good hands. So a good object to use was the meteor the scientists had arrived on. The Seven created a loop around the meteor, breaking the temporal loop around it and making it fall into a rift. Up in space, the Seven prepared to guide the meteor into the 0 point. That was until Paradigm shot forward and deep dived into the 0 point as an attempt to make up for all the mistakes she had done prior to this event. Where she ended up from boosting into the 0 point, no one knows. The Seven still focused on their mission and guided the meteor into the 0 point, pushing it back into the bridge, but the 0 point was too far gone and destabilized, sucking everything into a black hole, and everything went dark. Three days. 3 long days in the black void of space. We finally awake on a brand new island. The 0 point rearranged everything and made another 2 islands, Apollo and Artemis, the top side being Apollo. The IO, now back in control of the 0 point, sent a group called Ego onto the island to see if there was any signs of the Seven, but sadly for the loopers, there was not. Season 1 of Chapter 2 was mostly about the loopers and the IO getting used to the new island, but in Season 2, however, the members of Ego had evil snapshots, counterparts who were in a group called Alter. Snapshots are clones of people who would escape the loop to continue the round of Battle Royale. So the 2 groups end up fighting, but it's all a distraction for the real mastermind, Midas. Midas has the power of the Golden Touch, a power he was cursed with when him and his wife, Marigold, found the tomb of Oro and Aurelia, the elementals of Earth and its natural resources. But Midas learned how to control it and was able to have a daughter, Jules, but she's not important until later. It turns out Midas was the true mastermind between the Ego and Alter War. He's an ex-employee of the IO's Doomsday Division and had quite a strong say on the managing of Ego, and the entire time Midas has been sending his agents to watch the battles of the 2 factions so he can keep up the facade for the imagined order while he works on something below his headquarters, something that can stop the loop. But Midas needed help, so he enlisted the help of his daughter Jules, who had become an engineer. Midas made the blueprints, and Jules built the Doomsday Machine. However, in return, Midas would have to give Jules the agency and control over Alter/Shadow, and he agreed, believing his plan to be top-notch. The day came. The storm enclosed around the agency, and Midas sprung his device. First, he deployed 5 pylons to allow the Doomsday device to attack the storm from all angles, and finally he deployed his device. It began to push back the storm, breaking the loop. Thing is, the device is powered by the 0 point, and it teleports us into an IO office. On the desk are files on Midas, Jules and Lynx, a character from Chapter 1 Season 7, meaning he's been planning this for a long time. We return, and the device has malfunctioned. You know how I mentioned the storm has sentience? Well, it's angry, and begins to close in on the agency. But Midas and Jules get it back up and running, and it succeeds, pushing the storm all the way back. At first, everything seems peaceful, the loop is gone. But suddenly, we're teleported one last time to the office. Stumbling through the door was IO agent John Jones, who is discombobulated, asking you one question. Can you hear me? We're teleported back to the island, and unfortunately, the IO had a failsafe. They replaced the storm with water, but it was only hold for 3 days, and then the storm will be back. And the result is Fortnite Chapter 2 Season 3! Was disappointing for Law. Midas is stuck in the loop and disappears for 2 years. Jules got a rend of the deal and then instantly makes peace with Ghost, and they disappear for 2 years as well. So yeah, underwhelming. Anyway, time to talk about Marvel, baby! Woo! Galactus, the devourer of worlds, sensed the 0 point's power and became enticed by the power it could give. For, his herald at the time, dived into a reality 0 to warn the citizens, and the loop already started taking its toll. In his final moments, he called upon the Bifrost and summoned the Avengers, the most important being Iron Man, protected by his airtight suit. Mr. Genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, starts working right away on a counter to Galactus. He teleports his lab onto the island and starts figuring out the loop and snapshots, so he created millions of snapshots of the Stark Industries battle buses in multiple loops, fill with gamma bombs, and plans to get Galactus to eat them and have him sent flying into a sideways rift. A few weeks later, Galactus arrives and tries to devour the 0 point, but the 0 point, deciding it's too soon to rearrange the island, teleports everyone, including Galactus, into the in-between. Galactus, seeing the army of battle buses, sends out his own army of Gorges, which we defeat with ease. The plan works at the end of the day, and Galactus disappears. As a result of that event, though, the 0 point has been exposed and is in the open, so Dr. Sloan sends in John Jones to go deal with it. He takes with him a portal device to go and recruit bounty hunters to protect the 0 point and kill anyone who gets near it. But as we, the Looper, approach Season 6, Jones starts to realise that IO are doing nothing, so he betrays them and steals some restricted files about the Seven, so he can bring the Foundation, the leader of the Seven, to the island, so he can hopefully repair the 0 point, as it has been destabilising over time. Dr. Sloan, the right-hand woman of the IO, goes onto the comms and tells Jones to stop, but he says shut up and does it anyway. After dodging all the hunters he brought to the island, he reaches the 0 point, puts the coordinates in for the moon, throws in the portal device and brings down the Foundation, who instantly starts beating on Jones for being an IO agent. But Jones simply says, I can get you all members of the Seven and Jenna so you can beat him up. And then the Rock stops and helps out Jones. After realising that the 0 point is about to implode, Foundation tries the blooming process. A process that's meant to empty the 0 point's power so it becomes stable again. But even that fails, so Foundation, like a Chad, holds the 0 point together with his bare hands. He tells Jones to overload the portal device. Why? Well, Jones had to open a lot of portals to bring the hunters to Reality Zero. And to do that, he utilised the 0 point's energy. So the device gets overloaded, the portal should destabilise and give Foundation enough power to pull the 0 point back together, and encase it in a metal spire to help it heal, and eventually send it back to its rightful place. The only downside being Jones would be stuck in the loop. Makes sense? Probably not, but that's what happens, and then IO gets involved. We send some Spire Guardians to spy on the main spire from 6 mini outposts on the corners of the map, and one at the main spire to make sure no one tries to rescue the Foundation. But one person didn't care about the Spire assassins. His name was Raz, and he believed the Spire had been calling out to him since he was a child. So he tasked us, the Loopers, to go investigate the crystals growing out of the Spire, and we find they emit a metallic hum, which can be translated. So Raz built a device that did so, and it was a message from an all too familiar person, the Foundation, and he said Jones knows. However, John Jones was missing, So we track down snapshots of him all over to see if he can help us. Quick warning, we're going into cringe territory. Meanwhile, Batman was on the Fortnite island trying to figure out its secrets. After he was drop-kicked into a sideways rift that had appeared in Gotham, the world's greatest detective was now stuck in the loop and was trying to find a way out. So he teams up with Catwoman and tries many things to see what would happen, like leaving the object at the end of the loop, to see if it was there the next loop. Eventually, he notices a pattern and realises that he's standing direct to the centre of the storm while being the last person standing. You'll escape the loop. Catwoman escapes first, then followed by Batman, who eventually meet a group of islanders who also escape the loop. These include Renegade Wader, Bonehead, Fishstick, Bandolette, Magnus, Eternal Voyager, and finally Deathstroke. Together they come up with a plan to escape the island. After seeing the 0 Point's dimension hopping abilities, they believe that is the key to getting home. But they can't approach from the spire due to the spire assassin's presence, so they turn their eyes to the bunkers, which can only be opened by a very, very specific frequency. Fishstick is sent to go look for traps while everyone else goes down into the bunker. They fight some rock golems, they find a collapsed IO storage room with Fishstick's charred body under a bit of rubble. Yeah, so Fishstick in his final moments gives Batman a piece of a portal gun that protects someone from the loop, and then he dies. After that very, very unfortunate loss, they make it to the main facility of the bridge where the 0 Point is kept. Eternal Voyager, getting ahead of himself, leaps into the 0 Point and is sliced into a million pieces, which are scattered across the Omniverse. To prevent that from happening, Batman pinpoints exact locations and sends Renegade Raider back home. After that, he calls out Deathstroke for killing Fishstick. Deathstroke comes clean, saying he worked for the IO and was tasked for monitoring this group of islanders. But they all agree to send everyone back home, leaving just Batman, Catwoman, and Deathstroke. But Deathstroke pulls an epic gamer move and dips using a portal device to send himself back to Gotham City, leaving Batman and Catwoman behind. But while they were in the loop, they recognise someone else, Harley Quinn, so they kidnap her and use her to get home. Meanwhile, in Metropolis, Lex Luthor, Deathstroke, and the Batman who laughs were talking to Dr. Sloan, who made a deal with them. Deathstroke had planted an anchor device in the 0 Point, so she could use its power remotely, but she had to uphold her end of the deal. Right outside of the building was a sideways rift made by Dr. Sloan. Meanwhile, back in the storyline we actually care about, the search for John Doe's snapshots had been concluded, but only 2 had shown promising results. That being Dark Jonesy and Jonesy the First. Dark Jonesy was a snapshot left by Jones when he was ordered to go and invest Kevin. With what memories he had left from Jones, he told Raz about something called a spirit vessel that was owned by the Imagined Order, and Raz was interested, so he stole one and found a scroll inside. It spoke of a spire artifact owned by the Spire Assassin that can grant those who seek it infinite knowledge, but at the price of someone's life force. Meanwhile, the loopers who had found Jonesy the First had learned the truth. If Raz does succeed, then he will be lost to the artifact. We must go before it's too late and he attracts unwanted attention. But we are too late. Raz has killed and absorbed the life force of the Spire Assassin and has become Glyph Master Raz. But we defeat him and take the artifact, a shard of the cube. But as Jonesy the First implied, this meddling with dark magic attracted someone's attention. The Cube Queen was on her way. Firstly, Chimera scouts are sent to the island by the Cube Queen to do some surveillance. This time they were planning a full-on scale invasion, instead of just sending a single sentry cube. This is noticed by a islander known as Mari, who starts a radio show called Hot Sauces, which begins to promote alien kindness. So when the last reality arrived, the islanders weren't that scared. That was until the giant mothership hovered above the spire and ripped it out from the ground and destroyed it. Thankfully, the 0 Point, in this point in the timeline, had already fled underground. However, the shockwave from the explosion shook the 0 Point, causing the Foundation to teleport to the latest reality the 0 Point was locked onto. And if you remember, that was Gotham City. But after months of holding the 0 Point together, he fell unconscious and was not waking up anytime soon. Yes, we're doing more Batman comic stuff. There's even more comics coming out in June. The Chimera instantly begin their assault, terraforming Holly Hedges and spreading their foreign parasites to the island's native creatures. but Dr. Sloan stood in their way, setting up tons of bases to keep a watchful eye on the looming mothership. But not only that, the IO found Jones on the island and took him into the bridge, where he got his memories back from some form of IO tech. However, Jones's actions inspired IO agents to go against Sloan and destroy them from the inside, the most notable of which was Maven, who began sending the Chimera IO intel in a plea for safety. Once Sloan and the Loopers found this secret out, Dr. Sloan did a pro-gamer move and gave Maven fake intel, which was given to the Chimera, which claimed their main base of operations was beneath Courtney Crops. While this was true, Dr. Sloan already had a plan. She had rigged the complex with the bombs and the complex of bombs. The entire season, the mothership was abducting locations like Slurpy Swamp and Coral Castle. So from this pattern, Dr. Sloan deduced that the aliens would abduct Corny Complex with the bombs attached. She would trigger them, and boom, victory for IO. But once the bombs were inside, they couldn't be detonated. So Dr. Sloan would need a team to infiltrate the mothership and arm the bombs, and she knew the perfect people. So Dr. Sloan assembled a team of the most competent fetuses and told them the mission. This mission was codenamed Operation Skyfire. The day came and the mothership began to abduct the Loopers and the bomb-riddled Corny Complex. But the aliens were not stupid and made sure to unarm the Loopers, but they still retained their backpacks, which Dr. Sloan hacked into. She unlocked the prison doors and set the Loopers off. They entered a room full of saucers and were spotted almost immediately. As they rounded the corner, a squad of Chimera began firing at the Loopers, but with Dr. Sloan's quick thinking skills, they escaped and made it to the abduction chamber, which had a non-suspicious pool of dark matter sitting in the middle. Midway through the arming sequence, Dr. Sloan's signal was disrupted by the last reality, who decided to send a familiar face to kill the Loopers. The window slammed shut, and from the dark matter pool behind them, Kevin began to rise once more. After he exploded, his data was sent into the cube's cradle for continued use. Kevin began to slaughter the strike team, their teammates picking up their reboot cards for when they returned home. Dr. Sloan broadcast a pulse to the Loopers' backpacks, which shut down the cube. The Chimera, believing the strike team to have been killed, reopened the windows, allowing Dr. Sloan to re-establish a connection with the bombs. The Loopers waited anxiously as the bombs glowed an ominous red. A 2-minute timer shined on their backs, but then Sloan, like a snake, slithers away and leaves the Loopers to die. While awaiting death, the Loopers meander towards the cube, and they discover they have the option to reboot it, using the reboot cards of their fallen teammates, and thus Blevin is created, a blue cube that is the unified consciousness of the strike team fallen members. Blevin, recognizing his teammates, showed kindness a cube has never shown before, healing instead of hurting. Suddenly, the Loopers and Blevin rise higher into the ship as the Chimera believe it is time for the cube to become a power cell for the mothership. All is quiet at first. Then the cube appears. A dark matter cube, then another, then thousands, with one gold one firing the back. Before the Loopers have time to take in the situation, the bombs explode. The Loopers, Blevin, and several cubes fall towards the island. The Loopers look up as the saucer comes towards them. They hold up their arms in a feeble attempt to stop it, but it strikes, and it all fades to black. Meanwhile, back in Gotham, the Foundation has awoken and was determined to find a way back to Reality Zero. Thankfully, Dr. Sloan had already opened a rift in Metropolis that all the DC villains were trying to go through to cause chaos. But he was in Gotham with Batman for some reason, and then they had a fight. After that, they realised they both hit the IO and fly towards the rift in Metropolis and agreed to close it. Foundation tries to enter the rift, but is shot out the sky by Lex Luthor in an airtight suit. But Foundation just destroys it. Then Foundation is destroyed by the Batman who laughs, who tackles him into Reality Zero and cracks his helmet. Thankfully, Foundation traps him in the loop and escapes, but he returns to an island of chaos. The aftermath of Operation Skyfire left the island covered in debris and cubes, the most important of which was the Golden Cube, which was the Cube Queen. And she obviously wanted to take over the island. Her plan was to use a similar spell to the Ice King and spread corruption over the map. So, her cube monsters could survive without the need of a sideways bubble. So the Queen travelled around the island and control-seed the cubes and created smaller cubes which would aid in a quest. A few weeks later, all the cubes on the island had met at the centre of the map and created the convergence, and brought with it caretakers, huge golem-like creatures with a hole in their chest. And the Cube Queen emerged from the golden cube and showed a physical form. The following weeks, she sat in a bubble, spreading corruption and the convergence, eventually forming it into the pyramid, with the golden cube smack dab in the middle. However, the Cube Queen faced with one problem: the Loopers, which had been funding a war effort to destroy the last reality. So she had to destroy them and the IO to finally win. Then came the end of Chapter 2. The Loopers sat waiting at Base Guava, a base built by the IO as a last-minute countermeasure, a ragtag effort. Suddenly, lightning struck in the centre of the fort, but fear not, it was Blevin. Realising the Loopers were in danger, he deployed a shield around them as they prepared for war. The sirens rang out and the sky darkened. The Q-Queen laughed at the pitiful resistance below. As she gathered energy, using the golden cube like a lightning rod, she shattered the bubble and said, "The last reality is at hand!" She weakened the 0 point by draining its power with the golden cube, and that allowed her to destroy the bubble, revealing the outer space and the armada of sources of doctors and motherships, all of which were originating from the cube's cradle. Blevin was able to withstand the first 2 rounds of source fire, but faltered on the third, making the Loopers an easy target. The Queen spread her corruption, allowing caretakers to roam and progress towards the Loopers, but they stood strong and defeated a few. But the Queen ordered the sources to take the weapons of the Loopers away, leaving the Loopers almost defenceless. But Blevin continued to fight, destroying caretakers left and right. The Queen realised if this were to continue, the Loopers would win. So she sent a doctor to destroy him, truly leaving the Loopers defenceless. Rest in peace, Blevin. Meanwhile, in the bridge, Dr. Sloan was interrogating Jones, with a right-hand man, Gunnar. Ready to get out of here, Dr. Sloan just decided to kill him. But then the Foundation breaks down the door, game ends the IO guard and Gunnar, and rescues Jones, and leaves Dr. Sloan in the torture room. Him and Jones race towards the 0 point, preparing to flip the island, so the 7 can finally have the advantage. Jones is ordered to shut down the gyro system, and the island shakes. The Foundation calls in the visitor and the scientist from the Ice Moon, and they fly in, saving the Loopers and taking them down into the bridge, where we meet up with Jones and the Foundation. Suddenly, a caretaker cracks the glass and floods the bridge, destroying it. The Loopers emerge on the water's edge and watch the island flip over, the Q-Queen possibly dying in the process by hitting the water. The brand new island strikes the water, but as a result, a huge tidal wave slams into the Loopers. They're left on a piece of driftwood, heading for the new Chapter 3 island. The Loopers awake on the island and have a chat with the Foundation, who gives us the deets and tells us we are going to beat the imagined order and liberate the 0 point. At first, our home is serene until the day Sloan arrived, who had washed up on the Chapter 2 map and had now drilled onto the top side and began recon, waiting for the right time to attack. At this time, the scientist tried his best to reunite the 7 and make them focus on impending doom, but nothing worked. Their mistrust of one another would be the downfall of Reality Zero. Without warning, seismic activity was felt below foot, and before we knew it, the IO had constructed Command Cavern, a hollowed-out mountain stocked with everything the IO could need for war, plus hidden secrets behind 50-foot doors. Sloan, Gunnar, and the rest of the army stayed as incognito as possible and disrupted the 7's preparation for war, jamming comms, jamming space missions, even jamming the Loopers' ability to build. The day Sloan had been waiting for was here. IO declared war with the island, and the fort just broke the surface. The Loopers fought for their new home, even getting help from friends from other realities, but it was not enough. Effortlessly, the IO took over 80% of the island from Tilted Towers to Daily Bugle. The flags of IO flew. Only a few pockets of resistance remained, that being the Sanctuary, Synapse Station, the Joneses, and 7 outposts. Thankfully, other members of the 7 were on the island. On day 1 of the war, both the Origin and the Imagined were on hand. The Origin took care of all the battle plans, leading the Loopers on the offensive and pushing back the IO. 2 more members of the 7 arrived this season, The Imagine and the Order. The first thing you'll notice is the fact they share the same name of the bad guys. We may want to watch these two. They may have a big role to play during the upcoming live event. The Imagine has the uncanny ability to receive a plan from the Origin or the scientist and improve upon it. Unfortunately, she remembers nothing of her past. Her memories are a complete blur. She spends most of her time trying to figure out her history. At one point, we helped her access some top-secret IO files in an attempt to help her and her sister. Imagined and presumably her sister are strong believers in the paradigm. She's aware of her slanderous past, but stands by her no matter what. Seven's inability to get along is causing us to falter. There are major camps in the resistance. Pro-paradigm or con-paradigm. The Imagine, the Order and the Scientists are all for pros. However, the Foundation Origin is not as convinced. The seed of distrust between the members of the Seven may cost destroying the live event, because the mech is now rebuilt, and this is their final chance to work as a team. Let's see if they can pull it off. That brings us to the Collider. The Imagine Order were winning right off the first bullet, but as the season progressed, they only have a sliver of territory left, so they pulled out the big guns. The Collider, a machine which pulses with powerful energy at regular intervals. Jones gives us some info on the machine. Its name all too familiar for Fortnite lore fanatics. It's a doomsday machine. In one of our quests from Origin, we hacked into an IO holotable and watched what the IO has in store for us. As the Origin puts it, everything in the loop will be gone. But Jones wasn't done meddling into IO files. While looking into the sisters, he found something very, very important. The sisters' files had been wiped completely by none other than Geno. It's all going to come full circle on June 4th, and I hope to see you there. But some questions still linger. What is behind those doors in Command Cavern? Did the Queen survive? What about the Devourer skeleton? What happened to the Colombos? Will we ever get confirmation that Paradigm is Singularity? What came first, Sanctuary or the Moon Base? Well, hopefully everything will be answered on June 4th, the day of Collision. I hope to see you guys there. Goodbye and take care.